Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. My goal with this podcast is to give police officers more encouragement than what they usually get. So on this podcast, you'll hear from cops who have been where you are, sharing their wisdom, experiences, and the lessons that they've learned. I interview a wide variety of police on a wide variety of different topics. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are going to help you confidently navigate through the trauma, the stress, your career, and your family, and beyond. When an officer looks up this show on a podcast app like Apple Podcasts, they see ratings and reviews. If you're listening on Apple Podcast and you like what we do here at Hey Chaplain, then you can encourage those officers to hit play by leaving a 5-star rating and writing a review that tells them what Hey Chaplain has done for you. Your ratings and reviews, your recommendations, mean the world. Today we're talking to Rick James. No, not that Rick James. Richard James is a chaplain with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police from the Vancouver, British Columbia area. He is a former Canadian police officer and has been working in church ministry for several years. He was also a police chaplain in New York State for some time. Rick journeyed across North America and made a visit to my Kansas City studio as part of his trip. And at the time, he held the record for the furthest distance traveled to visit me in person. But just a week after recording this, Jake, the international security specialist guy, visited me from Thailand. So I had no idea that the distance traveled record would be broken so soon. Here's RCMP chaplain Rick James. Hello, Rick. How are you today?
I'm very fine, Jared. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You should get an award. I think of the people who have come to my office studio to record with me. I think you've traveled the farthest. Where are you from?
From Chilliwack, British Columbia. It's about 3,000 ballpark miles from here.
Did you drive?
Yes.
Oh, God bless you. How long a drive is that?
Well, basically, my granddaughter graduated from high school in Ohio. And so my wife said, well, I wanted to go anyways, but yeah, we're going to Ohio. And that was last weekend. And then it's coincidence there, our church conference happened to be a couple of days later. So we kind of tied them both in.
So you spent multiple weeks here in the U.S.?
Right now we are, yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your work in the United States. For some years, you were in upstate New York, is that right?
Upstate New York, yes.
Okay. So tell me about that. What were you doing there with the police department?
I was a child, did a lot of ride-alongs, and got to know the fellas quite well. And if there was anybody I needed anyone to talk to, I was always available. There was also, because I've taken several CISM courses, I would get also called for briefings. You know, and so through the department, through various members of the department.
And this was in Lewiston?
Lewiston, New York.
Lewiston, New York. It's up in the Niagara Falls area?
Just, as a matter of fact, right on the Niagara River heading towards Lake Ontario.
Okay.
And
they had to bring in a Canadian to be their chaplain?
Well, I happen to be just kind of sitting around doing nothing. I belong to a ministerial association, and there happened to be a woman that was a chaplain. And so I went up to her one day and said, so what are the chances of, I can do this because I was a cop, and so but I've always had a cop mind.
Yeah.
So I drive by a car accident and I say, okay, how did that accident happen? Or what did that guy do? Whatever. And so she introduced me then to the chief of the Lewiston Police Department. And from there, it just went on from there. Then I went through two other chiefs. One retired he retired, went teaching school. And then the next chief came in, and him and I were really good buddies. So I could walk into his office and say, hey, Chris, how you doing, kind of thing. And then when he retired about 5 years later, then the sergeant was given the opportunity. See, when you're dealing with a small town, from my understanding, the mayor appoints the chief through a process.
That's pretty common. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And the chief that was then chosen afterwards, I said to him, "So do you want me to hang around? Do you just stay on duty?" He said, "Absolutely."
Huh.
And I actually got more calls, I think, from Frank at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to go and visit because of an incident or death in the family or whatever it is that is needed. So I did more work with people outside of the department itself.
Okay. So you had relationships with the officers, but you were also helping victims of crime and their families.
Yeah.
And so kind of doing both sides of chaplaincy.
Yes.
How did you find it getting to know young American police officers? Is that challenging?
It is, because you're an outsider.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm a Canadian in an American system. And cops are very seclusive. They're very, what's the word I'm looking for, where they hang out with other cops.
Yeah.
And here I am.
They stay isolated.
Maybe that'd be a better word. And so I would just kind of hang around the office, go in and what I call the bullpen. When the job I had before, we had an area that we called the bullpen.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of bull in the pen. So I'm just putting that out
Pretty
there.
sure that's a baseball term, but that also is true. Yes. Yeah.
So I'd go in there and I'd walk into the office and I'd just sit there and talk to the officers. And so then they were able to get to know who I was on a friendly basis.
Yeah.
And I'd go and talk to the chief, but I was only with the chief for maybe 10 minutes. But then the rest of the time I'd go into the bullpen and just be with the officers.
Yeah.
And I got to know, I had quite a few friends came out of that. But you're always, unfortunately, because of the type of work that the officers do, you're always going to get that one or two guys that I'm an outsider.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it takes.
There's always that distrust of outsiders.
Exactly. You're going to spill the beans or you're going to go tell the chief or whatever scenario they come up with. But I've quite enjoyed just listening.
Yeah.
I figured that as a chaplain for the police department, whether it's Lewiston PD or the RCMP, you're just a listener.
Mm.
If they have stuff that they need to get rid of, I hope that they trust me enough, at least in Lewiston, as some of the officers did. But I want to try and get that same trust here now with the RCMP.
What do you think has helped you more? Having worked as an officer as a young man, or having years in church and working in church leadership? Which do you think helps you more as a chaplain?
I really thought of that question before. I think being an officer as a young person, back then, it gave me a bit of an insight as to what police do.
Yeah.
Even though I was out of it then until 2006.
Yeah. So you'd spent years away, but you did have some common ground, some point of familiarity.
Oh yeah, always did. Cops have always been an interest for myself.
Sure.
When I got the opportunity in 2006 to join with the Lewiston PD, I jumped at it, and I think I was fairly good at it. At least I hope I was. You don't really know what you leave behind with an office until many years later.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that guy because he was, or I remember that guy because, you know what I mean? There's that.
Yeah.
And so I hope that I left a good review with the chief and myself.
But now you are a chaplain back in British Columbia with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yes.
This is a federal level law enforcement agency in Canada, but out west especially, there's a lot of work in local places that maybe aren't big enough to have their own police department.
That's right. Yeah.
So you're a chaplain with them. What's the difference? I think that's what I'm interested in, is what's the difference between an officer with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, with the RCMP, versus the officers you knew in New York?
The gun law in Canada.
Okay.
We have a gun law in Canada that we are not. If I bought a gun before this legislation came down, and I wanted to go to the local gun range, I had to pre-opt where I was going. I had to phone somebody and say, I'm going to go leaving point A. This is the route I'm going to be going to port B. and I cannot deviate from that point.
Because you're transporting a weapon.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then when I come back, they know exactly what time I'm going to be going back to point A.
Wow.
Where here in the U.S., specialists was officers that they were always carrying.
Yeah. Off duty,
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I know officers, if they're wearing pants, they have a gun.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's just, they always have a gun.
Or if they got a really baggy sweater on or something.
Oh yeah.
They're carrying.
Definitely carrying. Yeah. Maybe 2 guns. Yeah.
I've known officers that have carried 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
One here, one on their back, and one on their boot. So
But when a Canadian officer, when he leaves work for the day,
he leaves it at the locker at the office. Yeah.
Okay. So he does not go home with that weapon.
Apparently, there's the odd chance if this officer, male or female, is doing something the next morning somewhere else.
Okay.
They are allowed then to take transport.
Okay, so there's exceptions.
There are a few exceptions.
Okay.
But that's entirely up to the inspector as to whether she would be allowed to carry that weapon.
But generally speaking, your officers, they leave work for the day and
they're done.
And they're not carrying a weapon.
Yep.
Okay. Do they feel vulnerable? I think my officers would feel pretty vulnerable.
Yeah, but don't forget, there's a difference in gun laws here.
Sure.
You have the Second Amendment, which allows people to carry all the time, depending on state law.
Yeah.
Where in Canada, we've never had that.
Okay, so the fewer guns there, but criminals always.
That's the issue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we don't want to get into all the politics of that, but boy, that is interesting, though. Yeah. The different dynamic and whether an officer feels safe or feels like they can protect themselves and others off duty. That's something maybe officers in the United States would take for granted.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always armed.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't necessarily be the case in another country.
You have the castle law here.
Yeah. Castle doctrine.
We don't have that in Canada.
Yeah. We don't have that in every state. Some states have it, some don't.
Okay, and I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
Yeah. Tongue-in-cheek, it's not a joke. It's kind of a joke. But the tongue-in-cheek idea is that if you shoot someone who's climbing into your house, like climbing in through a window, you need to make sure that 51% of their body is inside the house. Otherwise you could be in trouble.
Right, yeah, really.
You can't go chasing them down the street and shoot them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because now you become the aggressor.
Right.
Rather than the...
And that does vary from state to state. I've been through enough gun law courses, seminars and things where they said, here's what it is in Kansas, here's what it is in Missouri, here's what it is in Illinois.
It's interesting.
And it varies quite a bit.
Yeah.
When I travel through Illinois to visit my in-laws, if I'm transporting my gun, I am supposed to, I believe, have it not on my person. It's supposed to be locked. And I think I was told at one point that the ammunition and the gun had to be separate.
Oh, is that right?
And so where in Kansas I can drive with it, with the gun on my person.
Right.
So it varies from state to state. But
I know I had a permit concealed carry in New York, but if I'd bought a gun, and because we also had a church camp in Ohio, so if I wanted to go through Pennsylvania and I got stopped, I could be in trouble.
Yeah. Yes. Similar. Yeah.
Because
similar
different
gun laws, different states, and they change all the time.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
What's
allowed and what's not allowed.
Yeah, exactly.
But Canada has been pretty strict compared to the U.S. and has gotten stricter.
Yes.
All right. Well, tell me about other things in the life of an officer. Do you call them Mounties? Is that common, uncommon, acceptable, not accepable?
Oh, yes, it's acceptable. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
If someone's,
I didn't know if that was a slur or something.
No. If you walk down the street and someone says, "I need trouble," so I just call them Mounties or call the police.
Okay.
Call 911. So no, that's a common term to call them, because it goes back to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
They're all on horses originally.
That's right.
I will need to do a history episode on the RCMP because there's some interesting stuff. You and I were talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
The history with the Yukon Gold Rush and other elements in Canadian history and why they have these federal officers. I'll mark that down as something to record in the future.
It's really the RCMP have got a really cool history.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, I'm hoping when I'm finished our church conference this weekend, that I'm going to go up to Regina where they do the training.
Okay.
They do a 6-month training.
Kind of a boot camp kind of a thing?
I guess if that's what you want.
Or police academy.
Police academy.
In between, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, because you said the RCMP's got a very militaristic, paramilitary kind of history.
Yeah.
And so it's a law enforcement agency, but they definitely have a military bearing kind of thing to them.
I know, because they've got a really cool museum that they just redid.
Oh, wow.
And
I love a good museum.
Because I'm a chaplain, I've also got an inroad to a couple of people that I'm going to contact up there and say, listen, my wife and I are going to be here at such and such a date. What are the chances? Because of the history of the organization, I've always loved the RCMP.
Yeah. In the United States, in most places, you're going to have multiple tiers of jurisdiction. You're going to have a municipal police department, then you'll have a county sheriff's office, typically, and then you'll have statewide agencies, sometimes multiple agencies, state police and the state troopers and investigative agencies and all sorts of different groups. And then you have federal agencies, and there's a whole mess of those.
Border Patrol
FBI,
is right there.
ATF, Border Patrol. There's all kinds of different agencies. There's actually a pretty lengthy list of federal agencies in the United States. In Canada, specifically in British Columbia, where you're out west, what do you have? You have, like, Vancouver has its own police department.
Yes. Some
of the smaller towns have their own police departments. Yes. But then what's next? Where
we are in Chilliwack, like I was saying earlier, if a guy's one of the towns is in Agassiz, and if he comes across let's say a shooting, okay, and she is the only one on duty that day. So we may have to bring in someone from Chilliwack, which is over half an hour's drive.
That's closest backup.
That's the closest backup to the situation. So I mean, there's that.
So a Mountie from Chilliwack is coming up.
Yeah. They'll probably send an NCO, non-commissioned, and maybe another, depending on what the situation is.
Right.
But they'll send somebody in from Chilliwack to
okay.
Because the hope is actually the closest community to Agassiz. I'm using that town. But they've only got maybe one or two officers there, where they have the bigger pool in Chilliwack, and then they draw from the bigger pool.
So tell me if I'm understanding this. In multiple provinces of Canada, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are doing some local police work because there's maybe not an agency there in like a very small town or something.
Right. Yes.
There's not necessarily a provincial law enforcement agency.
No, not in British Columbia.
And so they're covering that middle ground.
Yep.
And then they're also covering the federal level. Anything that would be, federal jurisdiction, they're covering that. So it's things that cross provincial lines.
Yes.
They're covering all of that.
Yeah.
And so there's a wide range. And there's not that many federal agencies in Canada. Not like the United States has this lengthy list.
You got a hockey sock.
You lose track of all the acronyms. It's ridiculous.
Alphabet soup.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So an RCMP officer is really wearing a lot of hats and covering a wide range of stuff to do police work-wise.
Yep.
When you go into a roll call, those RCMP officers are doing what kind of work? Are they getting into patrol cars and doing like patrolling?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's the staff sergeants start basically at 4:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, and then the next shift takes over.
12-hour shifts.
12-hour shifts.
Okay.
He will then read a report from some of the major stuff that happened throughout the previous shift, and they'll pass around if there's people that they need to watch for, or if there's just different various things within, and then so they'll go around the room and people will talk about this, that, and the other thing, and then they'll look at me and say, "Well, chap, what have you got something to say?" And I said, "Right now, when I first started with them, I basically came on and said, I'm willing to go for a ride along if anybody would like to ride along, but I'm here just to support." When I go in there now, I just say, "Listen, guys, I'm here to support you, and you're in my thoughts and prayers, and I'm always available if you need me."
And they have taken you out on ride-alongs?
Yeah, I've gone out, yeah.
Yeah, and doing everything from traffic enforcement to calls for service, all sorts of stuff.
And checking on welfare people, and if there's people in there that have to be home at a certain time, then they'll go maybe an hour later.
Yeah.
And then just make sure that the person is in the home. And I'm right along with them on that.
How difficult is it to become an officer in the RCMP? Is that quite a process?
It is. It's the process that we were talking about before, the vetting process that I went through is basically the same as what the RCMP members to be an officer go through. I've talked to some officers that it may take a year and a half. The process, and I've heard some guys have been through in 8-9 months, depending on circumstances. But generally,
so maybe somebody prior military
possibly
might get in a little quicker if they had another government job.
Actually, right now, the RCMP is looking to other departments, like other municipal departments, and saying, if you want to change the scenery, you know, hey, there's a training. I don't know what the training period is, but there's a short training period for us that you need to learn.
But you could lateral from Vancouver PD over to RCMP potentially.
Then you got to go to what we call a depot in Regina for training. And then once you come
correct me if I'm wrong with my Canadian geography. That's in Saskatchewan.
Exactly.
Right. God bless you.
Exactly.
That is. I've heard people still having post-traumatic stress from having to drive across Saskatchewan, and so
you go to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. There was a joke about that, and the guy says they're speaking a different language. You know what I mean? Yeah. So depot is where the training is.
Yeah.
And it was brought in probably 100 plus years ago.
Sure.
And so they do everything. As a matter of fact, they have the oldest church in Saskatchewan in depot property.
Really?
And I've been in that church because I belong to an organization called Canadian Police Chaplains Association, CPCA. And when we were there, probably 09, 10-ish, something like that, we do a service every Sunday. With the Sunday that we were there in the Chaplain, it was really, because they got all the banners.
Right.
But they have a thing called a gidong, which I know I have no idea what they are, but it's about 2 feet long by about 1.5 feet tall. And it's got the awards from different places where the RCMP has been at war with.
Yeah, the regimental colors.
And so they,
banners and streamers and all sorts of. It changes from one country's military to the next, but they all have something similar.
Yeah.
You go to a ceremony, there's a bunch of flags and banners and stuff, and that's what that is.
It is and we had a memorial for an officer that died in the line of duty, and they brought the gidong out and they displayed it on during the service. So it's a very regimental thing to bring out. And the RCMP, like I said, is paramilitary.
Yeah.
For example, if I got called to, God forbid it ever happens, to a funeral, there are certain guidelines that I have to follow.
Right.
Because it is a federal organization and they want all the rules to be, and I understand that.
Sure.
Because they just don't want some Joe Schmuck going in there and screwing things up. Because my theory is, for weddings and for funerals, if I say one thing wrong, it screws up the whole process.
Yeah. There's 1,000 things you can do to make it memorable for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's very hard to get a wedding or a funeral right, but it's very easy to get it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how familiar you are with what happens at Depot in Saskatchewan, but is there any standard training for a Mountie to actually work with horses? Is that only a specialized thing?
That's a specialized thing.
Okay.
You got to be
there's no basic horsemanship class.
No.
Okay. All right.
That's a good question. No, you got to be on the job for, I believe, 5 years.
Okay.
And then they
probably send them to a special school then.
Yeah. Then they take them out of general patrol and they put an app out. Those that want to do this, go get a note from your NCO and then we'll talk.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, for any specific duty within the RCMP, they put out an application and then we just go from there.
Okay. For a young RCMP officer, what weighs on them the most these days?
That's a good question. We had we don't call them FTOs, but we get officers that train, and he works with that. Once, for example, if someone comes from Depot and ends up in Chilliwack or one of the other cities in the area, he works with that. They ride along together for 6 months, And then at the end of the 6th, if the officer says, okay, John Smith is a good guy, then he'll technically be given keys to a car, which is just, and it goes up on the bulletin board. Everybody just claps their hands and says, proud. But he's still under the auspices of that FTO for another year, maybe longer.
Yeah.
Depending on who the officer is. So you want to not only want to get your report correct, but you want to please the FTO, which then has got to go up to the staff sergeant.
Yeah.
So he's got to because once his signature goes on it, then it becomes what it is.
Yeah.
And then from there it goes up to the lawyer. My understanding at this point, it goes up to the lawyer. And if the lawyer don't like it, and there's been cases where they've had to come back and redo. That's why they always write things down on a notepad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it goes to court, my understanding is that they can bring their notepad with them.
Yeah. They check their notes.
Because this is what John Smith did, and this is what Mabel didn't do, for example.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the biggest stress is doing the reports and making sure that that it's done correctly.
The pressure to get it right.
Yeah.
Rick, thank you for driving over 3,000 miles to be here today.
It's been a pleasure, Jared. Thank you.
I appreciate Rick stopping in to visit me on his back and forth cross-continental journey. I'll definitely have to come back to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police again and do a history episode. Maybe interview an author of a great book on the subject, especially if the author has, law enforcement connections. I'm also looking to do an episode on horse-mounted units, especially the oldest and most famous ones. And unfortunately, I've had multiple leads fall through. So if you have any suggestions, my email is in the episode description. Drop me a line and let me know who to contact. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
You're 100% correct. You should always train first and evaluate second. Evaluation is a necessary component of it,
Sure.
But it is the secondary component. Train first, evaluate second. And you're 100% correct is this concept, this idea that we're going to test their manliness, that we're the gatekeepers to law enforcement, that if you can't measure up, then I don't want you here. I need to know how you're going to handle yourself in a fight, kid, because one of these days we'll get in one. And the reality is, let's teach them how to handle a critical incident so that they'll do it well later on, as opposed to just seeing if they can on their own. All that does is set up very confrontational learning experience or lack thereof learning experiences. And it makes things really, really rough on the recruit. It's rough enough as it is. There's no reason to make this more stressful.
This show is free for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. If you want to help this show reach more cops, chaplains, and other first responders around the world, please follow the link in the episode description to support the show. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city. But guidon, I assume that's a French.
I believe it's a French term.
Yeah, we say guidon.
Okay, you pronounce,
and
so it's the same thing.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. I've never heard guidon, and
it took me a while to try and figure out what this thing is.
It's a bunch of American guidon. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.